My name is Emily Carter. For 15 years, I fought fires in Denver. I thought I knew what heat was. I thought I knew what saving a life meant. But on a freezing night in January, I didn't just lose a battle with a house fire. I died. And what I saw on the other side wasn't just a tunnel of light. It was a calendar. I need you to listen closely. What I am about to share is not the result of oxygen deprivation. It is not a hallucination born from trauma. It is a direct message given to me by Jesus Christ himself. He set me back with a date. He showed me exactly what is coming to this world in December 2025. He called it the sifting. It is an event that will shatter our understanding of reality, spiritual darkness masquerading as natural chaos. If you believe that God is still speaking to his people in these final days, I'm asking you to stop and type "Amen" in the comments right now. Please tell me where you are watching from. And do not ignore the subscribe button. Not for my sake, but because every single person who joins this channel is another soul we can wake up before the lights go out. You need to know how to prepare for what's coming. But to understand the warning, you have to understand the death that paid for it. Let me take you back to the night everything changed. The night the floor gave way, and the real fire began. It was the kind of cold that snaps bone. January in Denver doesn't forgive, and that night, the wind was howling off the Rockies like a warning we were too deaf to hear. I was sitting in the ready room with my crew, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone lukewarm hours ago. We were tired. It had been a long shift, the kind where the silence feels heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. I looked around at the guys, men I'd trusted with my life for over a decade. We didn't need to speak to know we were all thinking the same thing. Just let us get through the night. But the bell doesn't care about fatigue. When the alarm finally tore through the station, it wasn't a request, it was a command. The dispatcher's voice crackled over the speakers, tight with an urgency that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Structure fire. East Colfax. Multiple calls. Occupants reported trapped. That last word, trapped, changes everything. It shifts the chemistry in your blood. You stop being a firefighter and you become a hunter, chasing down death before it can claim a prize. We were in the truck and rolling in less than 60 seconds. The city blurred past us, a streak of gray concrete and frozen streetlights, but I barely saw it. My mind was already mapping the layout of the old Victorian homes in that district. Narrow hallways, steep staircases, and old timber that burns hot and fast. When we turned the corner onto the block, the sky wasn't black anymore. It was an angry, pulsating orange. The house was a two-story beast of a building, and it was already breathing fire. Flames were licking out of the second-story windows, defying the snow that hissed as it hit the roof. The heat hit us before we even opened the doors, a physical wall of force that smelled of melting plastic and ancient, burning wood. "Carter, take the nozzle." "Miller, get the hydrant," the captain roared, his voice barely audible over the roar of the inferno. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the line and ran toward the front door. The radiant heat was intense, searing through my turnout gear. But then I heard it, a sound that cuts through the roar of any fire. A child's scream. High-pitched, terrified, and coming from the second floor. Fear is a luxury you can't afford in this job, so I buried it. I kicked the front door open, and the rush of oxygen fed the beast inside. Black smoke rolled over me like a tidal wave, blinding and choking, swirling with a life of its own. I dropped to my knees, keeping below the heat line, dragging the hose into the belly of the house. Every instinct I had was screaming that this fire was different. It felt heavier, darker, as if the house itself was fighting back. But I couldn't stop. Somewhere in that darkness, a child was waiting for a miracle, and I was the only one coming. The staircase was a throat of fire, swallowing the only exit, but I had to push through. The crying was coming from a bedroom at the end of the hall, a faint, rhythmic sound that was barely audible over the roaring hunger of the flames. I stayed low, my knees scraping against the blistering floorboards, my respirator hissing with every desperate breath. The thermal imaging camera in my hand was a wash of angry reds and whites. There was no safe path, only the path that led to the boy. I found him huddled under a twin bed, terrified and small, clutching a blanket that was already smoldering at the edges. I didn't waste breath on words he wouldn't hear. I grabbed him, shielding his small body with my turnout coat, wrapping him tight against my chest. "I've got you," I shouted into my mask, though the promise felt fragile against the heat that was now melting the visor of my helmet. I turned back toward the stairs, the floor trembling beneath us, like a living thing in pain. We were halfway to the landing when the house gave up the fight. There was no warning creak, just a violent, thundering crack that sounded like a gunshot. The main support beam snapped, and the floor didn't just break, it disintegrated. Gravity took us instantly. The sensation was terrible and brief, a stomach-churning drop into a mouth of darkness. I twisted my body in midair, a final instinct to take the brunt of the impact, desperate to keep the boy on top of me. I hit the concrete basement floor with a force that shattered reality. I felt my ribs collapse inward, a blinding flash of white agony that seared through my spine, and then the debris came crashing down on top of us. The roar of the collapsing house was the last thing I heard. Then the lights went out. But then the darkness blinked. 1 second, I was buried under a ton of burning timber, suffocating in agony. The next, I was standing. The pain was gone. The crushing weight on my chest gone. The screaming of the fire silenced. I looked around, confused. The basement was still there, but the smoke didn't sting my eyes. In fact, the air wasn't gray or black anymore. It was filled with a strange, liquid light, a golden hue that seemed to hum with energy. I looked at my hands. They weren't gloved. They weren't covered in soot. They were clean, glowing with a faint translucence. I drifted upward, unhindered by gravity or debris, passing through the wreckage as if I were made of mist. That's when I saw it. Below me, amidst the jagged wood and broken concrete, lay a body. It was twisted at an unnatural angle, buried to the waist in rubble. The yellow stripes on the turnout gear were unmistakable. The number on the helmet, 34, was mine. My crew was already tearing at the pile, their movements frantic, their voices muffled and distant. I saw Miller throw his axe aside and claw at the timber with his bare hands, screaming my name. I wanted to reach out, to touch his shoulder and tell him I was fine, that the pain had stopped. But as I reached down, my hand passed right through him. I pulled back, staring at the lifeless shell below me, and the realization hit me with a calm, absolute certainty. I wasn't the firefighter in the rubble anymore. I was the memory leaving it behind. The jagged ruins of the burning house faded away, dissolved not by distance, but by a light so absolute it seemed to rewrite the laws of existence. It wasn't the white glare of a hospital room or the harsh sun of a desert. It was a living substance, golden, thick, and humming with a melody that vibrated through the core of my being. There was no horizon here, no walls, only an endless expanse of radiance that felt like pure, distilled love. For a moment, I forgot the fire. I forgot the pain. I forgot that I had left a life behind. Then, the light began to condense. It swirled and gathered in front of me, weaving itself into a form that was undeniably human, yet terrifyingly divine. I had seen paintings of Jesus my whole life, gentle shepherds with soft eyes and lambs on their shoulders. But the man standing before me was not a painting. He was the architect of the stars. He wore a robe that looked like it was woven from light itself, but it was his face that brought me to my knees. His eyes were like flames, not the destructive fire I had just died in, but a refining fire that saw everything. In his gaze, there was nowhere to hide. Every secret I had ever kept, every lie I had told, every moment of selfishness, it was all laid bare. I felt a sudden, crushing weight of my own unworthiness. How could I, a flawed woman who cursed at bad drivers and held grudges, stand in front of the King of Glory? I collapsed, covering my face, trembling not from fear of punishment, but from the sheer weight of his holiness. I expected to be cast out. I expected to be told that I didn't belong in a place this perfect. But then, I felt a hand on my head. The touch was heavier than the collapse of the burning building, yet gentler than a mother's caress.
It anchored me.
The trembling stopped. I looked up, and the fire in his eyes had softened into an ocean of compassion. He didn't speak with a voice that moved air. He spoke directly into my soul, a sound like rushing waters and rolling thunder, yet intimate enough to be a whisper. "Emily," he said. My name sounded like a song coming from his lips. "You have spent your life fighting the fires of this world. You have been brave in the face of death. But the fire you know is only a shadow." He stepped back, and the golden light around us began to dim, replaced by a solemn gravity. His expression shifted from welcome to urgent command. "The world is sleeping, Emily. They eat, they drink, they marry, and they scroll, blind to the storm gathering at their door. I am sending you back." My heart lurched. "Back? But Lord, I'm finished." "You are not finished," he declared, his voice vibrating with the power of finality. "You must warn the sleeping. You must tell them what is coming. For the time is short, and the sifting is at hand." He lifted his hand, a gesture of sovereign command, and the floor of heaven seemed to turn into glass. Suddenly, I was looking down at the earth, suspended in the velvet void. But it wasn't the beautiful blue marble I had seen in photographs. It was a globe wrapped in suffocating shadows. From the North Pole to the equator, a thick, black smoke churned like a living storm, pulsing with a rhythm that felt like a diseased heartbeat. "Do you see this darkness?" he asked, his voice vibrating with a sorrow that could shatter mountains. "It will begin in December 2025. The world will call it chaos. I call it the sifting." As I watched, the surface of the world began to convulse. I saw storms that broke the laws of nature, hurricanes forming over land, blizzards burying deserts, and lightning that struck upward from the ground. It was ice and fire occupying the same sky. The physical world was tearing at the seams, mirroring the rot in the spiritual realm. Mountains trembled like waves, and entire cities were silenced by a cold so profound it froze the breath in people's lungs. But the weather was only the mask. Beneath the wind and the hail, I saw the true cause. The black smoke wasn't carbon or ash, it was spiritual entity. I saw shadows detaching themselves from the darkness, sliding through locked doors and closed windows. They stood at the bedsides of the sleeping, whispering lies that sounded like comfort. Familiar voices calling from the dark. Demonic imitations begging to be let in. The world would call it mass hysteria or a psychological breakdown, but I knew what I was seeing. It was the final deception. I saw millions of people staring at their screens, desperate for answers, but finding only static. They were panicked, isolated, and unprepared. And looking at them, I feel a terror now that I didn't even feel in the fire. If you are hearing this voice, you still have a choice. I saw the faces of those who mocked the warning, and their regret was a heavier burden than the darkness itself. If you don't subscribe right now, scroll away, but remember this moment when the sky turns black. You'll wish you had listened. You will wish you had joined this community of watchmen while there was still time. Jesus turned his gaze back to me, and the vision of the chaotic earth remained reflected in his eyes. "December 2025 is not the end, Emily," he said, his voice firm. "It is the separation. The wheat from the chaff. The faithful from the fearful. When the lights go out, only those who carry the light within will be able to see." Then the smoke over the nations parted, and the vision shifted. The terrifying scale of the global disaster collapsed into something far smaller, yet infinitely more painful. I wasn't looking at continents anymore. I was looking into my own kitchen. The image was sharp and cruel in its clarity. I saw my husband, Daniel, sitting at our oak table. The morning light was gray and thin, casting long shadows across his face. He looked older, his shoulders slumped under a weight that wasn't just grief, it was confusion. He was staring at my empty chair, shaking his head slowly, a portrait of a man trying to rationalize the irrational. Across from him sat our daughter, Hannah. She was curled up in her hoodie, the blue light of her smartphone illuminating her face, creating a ghostly barrier between her and the world. I leaned in, desperate to hear what they were saying, desperate to scream across the divide of life and death. "She's gone, Han," Daniel whispered, his voice cracking. "We have to move on. We can't keep indulging this." Hannah didn't look up. Her thumbs flew across the screen, scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. She let out a scoff that felt like a knife in my gut. "It's embarrassing, Dad. Everyone at school is talking about it. Mom's crazy vision. Mom's Jesus talk. She wasn't a prophet. She was just traumatized. Can we please just stop pretending?" The pain of the fire was nothing compared to this. To hear my own child, the girl I had carried, the girl whose hair I had braided, whose scraped knees I had bandaged, mock the very truth that was saving my soul, it shattered me. I fell to the ground at Jesus' feet, weeping with a ferocity that shook my spirit. "Please, Lord," I cried out, grabbing the hem of his robe of light. "Not them. Show them what you showed me. Force them to see. Do not let them walk into the darkness blind." I wanted him to promise a miracle. I wanted him to say he would send angels to shake the house and write the truth on the walls. But he didn't. He looked down at me, and his expression was filled with a tragic, ancient sorrow. "I cannot force the heart, Emily," he said, his voice quiet and devastating. "Love that is forced is not love. They have the prophets. They have the scriptures. And they will have your testimony. But the choice is theirs." He knelt, bringing his face level with mine. "This is the hardest test. To carry the light when those you love choose the shadow. You must go back and speak, even if they cover their ears. You must be the watchman for your own house, even if they lock the doors against you. Your prayers are the only shield they have left." I looked back at the vision of Hannah, still scrolling, unaware that the timeline of history was running out. I realized then that my mission wasn't just to warn the world. It was a war for the souls of my own family. And I was terrified I might lose. The return wasn't gentle. It was an act of violence. The golden piece of heaven was ripped away, replaced by a sensation like being sucked backward through a tunnel of razor wire. Gravity returned with a crushing vengeance. I felt the air force its way into my collapsed lungs, burning like acid. My eyes flew open, but I was blind, seeing only starbursts of white agony. "Clear," a voice shouted, followed by a jolt of electricity that arched my back off the gurney. I gasped, a jagged, desperate intake of breath that sounded more like a scream. The world flooded in, the sterile smell of rubbing alcohol, the frantic beeping of monitors, the chaotic shouting of an ER trauma team. I tried to sit up, thrashing against the restraints, my mind still reeling from the vision of the blackened earth. "December," I screamed, my voice raw and unfamiliar. "You have to prepare. December is coming." Hands pinned me down. A nurse with terrified eyes leaned over me. "She's delirious. Push 5 milligrams of midazolam. Mrs. Carter, you need to calm down. You've been in a severe accident." "No," I choked out, grabbing the nurse's scrubs with a strength I shouldn't have had. "It wasn't an accident. I saw him. I saw the fire. The sifting. It starts in 2025. The doctor stepped in, shining a penlight into my eyes, effectively silencing me with his authority. "Pupils are responsive, but dilated. She's hypoxic. It's the lack of oxygen, Emily. Your brain is firing random signals to cope with the trauma. You're safe now. Just rest." They didn't hear me. They heard a patient with broken ribs and a chemically unbalanced brain. Over the next few weeks of recovery, the isolation became worse than the physical pain. When I tried to tell Daniel about the darkness waiting at the door, he would just squeeze my hand and look at me with a pity that made my stomach turn. "Honey, you died for 12 minutes, he'd say softly. It's normal to have nightmares. But I knew the difference between a nightmare and a prophecy. A nightmare fades when you pour your morning coffee. This vision only grew sharper. Every time I looked at the calendar, I saw the numbers counting down like a bomb. The rejection stung. My crewmates avoided eye contact, and the department psychologist scribbled PTSD with hallucinations in my file. I realized then that Jesus was right. I couldn't force them to see. But I also couldn't stay silent. If the people I loved wouldn't listen, I had to find the people who would. I stopped trying to convince the doctors. I stopped trying to argue with Daniel. I went into the garage, set up my phone on a stack of old books, and hit record. My hands were shaking, not from fear of the fire anymore, but from the fear of being too late. I looked into the lens, took a deep breath, and began to speak the truth that the world was trying to medicate away. I need you to understand exactly what you are facing. What I saw coming in December 2025 is not just a geological event or a solar flare. It is a spiritual invasion. The darkness I saw wrapping around the globe wasn't the absence of light. It was the presence of evil. It was a living, breathing entity that hunted. When the sifting begins, the first sign won't be on the news. It will be a silence, a heavy, unnatural quiet where the birds stop singing and the wind stops blowing. Then, the sky will darken, not like night, but like ink spilled in water. When this happens, you must go inside. Lock your doors. Cover your windows. Do not look at the sky. The deception will be auditory. You will hear voices outside, voices that sound like your neighbors, your children, or loved ones who have passed away. They will cry for help. They will beg to be let in. Do not open the door. The Jesus I met in the fire told me explicitly, "The sheep know the shepherd's voice. The wolf mimics the lamb." If you open the door to the darkness, you invite the deception into your home. Physically, you need to be ready. Have water, have food, have warmth. But your pantry will not save you if your spirit is empty. You need to put on the full armor of God now, not when the shaking starts. Pray over your home. Anoint your doorposts. Teach your children that the name of Jesus is a weapon, not just a word.
I know this sounds terrifying.
I know part of you wants to click away, to go back to the funny videos and the comforting lies that say everything is fine. But look at the world around you. You know deep down that the shift has already begun. The clock is ticking louder every day. This is your moment of decision. When the world goes dark, it'll be too late to look for answers. It will be too late to find this community. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now while the light still shines. Join us. Let this channel be a lighthouse when the grid goes down. Don't let your pride keep you from the preparation you need. But I want to leave you with the last thing he told me, the truth that lets me sleep at night. The fire you fought on earth was only a shadow. The true fire is the testing of souls. The fire of December isn't coming to destroy the world. It is coming to purify it. It is coming to burn away the chaff so that only the gold remains. Do not fear the fire. Be the gold that survives it. Be the light that darkness cannot overcome. I'm Emily Carter. I've given you the warning. The rest is up to you. Prepare for December. And may God be with us all.